There's something fragile about the quiet moments in our home. In those fleeting instances, where silence cradles the rooms like a thin layer of frost on a winter morning, I find myself most at ease. That's probably why I noticed it right away, how the air started to hum with something I couldn't place. It began soon after we moved into the old house on Maple Lane, when Lily, my 7-year-old daughter, developed a peculiar habit. First, it was easy to dismiss. Children have imaginary friends. They're creators of whole worlds where dragons lie asleep beneath their beds and fairies dance at the tips of their fingers. But then there was one night when I stood by her door, silently absorbed in the bedtime ritual. Her whispers were soft but distinct, charting a conversation with someone I couldn't see. I waited for the telltale signs. It had to be her stuffed rabbit or one of her dolls, but her eyes weren't on anything tangible. They were fixed upward, drawn to the unseen world above. I brushed it off as the echoes of childhood whimsy. We didn't have an attic. I tried to say it to myself like a talisman. No attic, no space overhead where shadows could roam or secrets could fester. Just rafters and dust and the tangle of forgotten things left by the previous owners. Yet, the more I told myself it was nothing, the more certain I became that it was something. Days passed with the unsettling feeling tightening in my chest. Each time I'd catch Lily mid-whisper, I'd ask, "Who are you talking to, sweetheart?" And she'd giggle, turning those big eyes up to me full of mischief and innocence. "A friend," she'd say, as if it explained anything. Her insistence on our non-existent attic grown from a simple observation to something somber, something I've found nearly impossible to purge from the corners of my mind. She mentioned the attic with a casualness, as if it was her secret hideout. "My friend doesn't like it when you ask questions," she'd add matter-of-factly, her lisping voice carrying a note of reprimand that felt out of place on her tiny tongue. One evening, all alone in the shadowed depth of the hallway, I felt compelled to test reality, a foolish thing perhaps. Equipped only with my phone's flashlight, I climbed the stairs, each creak underfoot a little louder than seemed necessary. I poked my head into what was simply the loft I'd known it to be, saw only angled beams and darkness beyond. It was empty as expected, save for the whispers of outside branches scraping against the siding. You can imagine how it haunts me, that space above. Knowing there's no door leading beyond the ceiling, no hatch, no hidden stairs swallowed up by shadowy intrigue. There shouldn't be anything there. Yet every time Lily would tilt her head back with that knowing smile and whisper to the thing once thought imagined, it pressed deeper against my composure. The effect was unsettling, like flat notes in a melody, something jarring that should not be. Our lives continued amidst this quiet dread. My sleep was haunted by murmurs I couldn't quite make out, slipping from innocence to menace with syllables almost discernible, but disappearing as I woke in fits and starts. I tell myself that she's just a child, with a child's mind full of stories and games. It's comforting to reduce it to that, wrapping eerie uncertainties into rational explanations that fizz with sensibility. But when solitude finds me, as it often does gripping the midnight hours with cold fingers, doubts clamber into the spaces between thoughts, crowding them, demanding answers to questions I barely dared to frame. Just then, in those moments suspended between unease and rationalization, I swear I feel not quite alone. I told myself to stay grounded and see those innocent conversations for what logic insists they are. Nothing. After all, who can fit into a place that doesn't exist? My daughter's friend seemed exception enough. Ignoring the mounting sense of unrest left me teetering between denial and paranoia. Because really, what shape does reality take when a child talks to someone in an attic they describe vividly, one that's supposed to be nothing more than the roof directly above their ceiling? I continued weaving through our daily lives, stitching patches of normalcy together with each passing day. But it lingered, a persistent riddle woven into the fabric of our domestic bliss. There must be nothing, just empty air and worn beams, space enough for shadows to play tricks on the light. Yet under my daughter's gaze, the shell of assurance I wore began to crack piece by piece. I found myself wondering whether sanity might slip through such unseen gaps, echoing as softly and persistently as her unseen friend. I spent hours convincing myself otherwise, breathing in the fear till it became as familiar as my reflection, too close for the comfort of ignorance, but too vague for action. They say a mind is a sponge, wring it out, and truth drips away. I hope to imply soak in this fear, until it was just another quiet part of the big picture, leaving the inexplicable unexamined beneath our roof. Yet signal fires of reality blazed as always, as days slipped into nights, and the cycle ushered me once more back towards that strange, lingering whisper of a world beyond sight, laying within the walls of my suburban home. In a place where imagination spun invisible webs of secrets overhead, the line between possible and impossible thinned with each passing moment. Whether or not we had an attic faded in meaning, because I was beginning to feel the walls close in around me, testing my every reason and resolve. This unnerving circus of uncertainty would not cease, might never cease, unless I summoned the courage to once again face my invisible foes, hatched from a child's whimsy and my own adult despair. The night had a heavy, oppressive silence broken only by the rhythmic ticking of the old clock that stationed itself defiantly in the living room, marking each second with a dull thud. It was one of those moments when the darkness stretched in all directions, and you could almost hear it breathing. My hands were clammy as I clutched the kitchen counter, trying to dismiss the chill that had settled into my bones. Another night under this roof, I whispered to myself, trying hard to believe that daylight, flimsy and dismissive as it might be, would bring some form of relief from what now felt like a constant, lurking dread. Everything about this house, despite its unassuming appearance from the street with its chipped white paint and weathered porch, seemed finely tuned to mess with my mind. It wasn't just Lily, though her presence was almost like the grim center of this living puzzle. Since the first night, soft whispers had wormed their way through the walls, as elusive as figments of a fading dream, yet unsettlingly real. And then there was that attic, the attic that wasn't there. I've climbed up twice since that night, fumbling with rational excuses for what my eyes failed to see, but my heart insisted was there. It was all part of the same eerie orchestra, and I felt like a mere pawn under a maestro's control. Tonight was different, though. Lily was sound asleep in her room, her chest rising and falling with a peacefulness that eluded me. I remembered her earlier at dinner, eyes wide, talking animatedly about her friend up there. She'd been so specific, the way her friend was never cold, always had music playing, and never tired of hide-and-seek. These were ordinary games painted in ghostly strokes that left me reeling. My wife's dismissive laugh at the dinner table echoed in my ears as I struggled to keep my breathing steady. Her skepticism was a comfort that I couldn't feel for myself. She was away this weekend, visiting her mother. It was just Lily and me, and whatever else occupied this space above my head. As the clock's dull chorus continued, I willed myself off the counter and decided once more to confront the attic, or my fear. I moved quietly, not wanting to wake Lily as I passed her room. It lay at the far end of the hall, adjoining mine, seeming far too innocuous in the hue of the nightlight. My heart skipped a beat when I remembered her voice from earlier, sweetly insisting that once the attic door appeared, you could never ignore it again. But there was no attic door, not really. I reached the place in the hall where I'd unsuccessfully searched before. The plaster there was smooth to the touch, rendering any errant thought of a concealed entrance absurd. Yet tonight, the air itself seemed charged, expectant. I stared up, feeling more than ever like a puppet on strings, drawn to this spot with a magnetic force beyond understanding. And then I heard it, an unmistakable creak of wood above, as if someone moved deliberately, though subdued. My heart seized. Once more, Lily's earlier insistence rang through my mind like a cryptic lullaby. A feverish need to solve this overtook me as I went to fetch the step ladder. The house was silent except for my footsteps, which sounded garishly loud in the absence of any noise. As I set the ladder in place, I hesitated for a second, a reflexive act of self-preservation urging me to turn back. But talking myself out of this was no longer an option. I began my ascent near the ceiling and knocked on the drywall softly. Nothing. I wanted nothing more than proof, either way. When I pressed a bit harder, however, something strange happened. My fingers brushed what felt like the crack of a door frame, unseeable but tactile. It prickled at my skin as I traced it, finding the edges unerringly, impossibly real against the flat white paint. Swallowing hard, I pushed on a spot that felt promising, and with a slight, almost scripted creak, a segment of the ceiling shifted back, carving out a void of darkness overhead, a stale breath escaping from its confines. An opening. The air that escaped felt charged, like in Hal. Ecstatic during a storm. The unease that I've lived with since moving in crystallized into a tangible thing, wrapping around me like a shroud. With my heart pounding loud enough to deafen, I peered upwards into the blackness. Beneath the shadows where attic should meet sky, something more awaited beyond comprehension. As my eyes adjusted, I could just discern the whispers again, swirling through the open entrance not with the innocence of childhood, but with an otherworldly invitation, full of menace disguised as warmth. Whatever slumbered within, it wanted attention. And tragically, it already had mine. I thought the next few nights would bring quiet, a pause in the relentless drumming of tension that had taken residence in our home. Yet, a shadow seemed to have crept in, bartering daylight for a sense of perpetual dusk. Lily's giggles drifted downstairs more often now, each peal refracted by the hollow walls like shards of broken glass. I found myself pausing mid-step on the creaky hallway, listening to conversations I couldn't quite piece together, words lost in a soft breeze under the eaves. I didn't want to disturb her, yet the oddity of her chats made me shiver. A chill creeping up my spine like fingernails across an icy window pane. She talked about things she shouldn't know, the kind of knowledge that felt ancient, like stories woven before time learned to walk. I tried to dismiss it as fanciful babble, the weaving of dreams and nursery rhymes. But how could any child know the texture of fear so intimately, speaking of it with casual precision, like an old friend recounting tales of a distant past? I asked her about her friend again, hoping for clarity. She only smiled, a secret held tightly in the curve of her lips, a precious whisper unshared beneath the wary gaze of parental caution. Determined to bring light where shadows pooled, I decided to visit the attic once more. A midweek afternoon left me alone, tension building a nest inside my chest. A too long afternoon with too many hours to let my thoughts fester unchecked. With a stepladder in place and daylight filtering through grime-encrusted windows, I approached the attic entrance once again. The hatch groaned open reluctantly, the air above settling over me like a damp shroud as I pulled myself up. The space was as I remembered, yet infused with an almost tangible awareness that pricked at my senses. I tried rationalizing it away. Of course it felt different. I was dredging up places left alone, stirring dust and imagination. Yet, it felt as though the attic was watching me, evaluating. It was as if my presence disrupted an unseen equilibrium, each step an intrusion. There were objects here, old and forgotten, their narratives hanging listlessly amidst the beams and dust. A child's toy, its paint worn and peeling, sat in a corner. Who it had belonged to, I couldn't say. Another relic of the past, untethered by time and occupancy, merely shifted with each new family. As I turned, the whisper of my name drifted through the gloom. It was soft, a plea woven into the frayed threads of silence. My pulse staggered. The deliberate cadence of its murmur was unmistakably Lily's. I glanced around, finding nothing except the stark shadows lounging in careless heaps. Another draft skated across my skin, tugging at my courage and whispering old fears of ghosts and revenants. Each breath I took felt heavy, weighted with the fear that reality was fraying at its edges. Lily's voice echoed again, part of this place yet impossibly distant, as if filtering through layers of forgotten history. My instinct screamed for me to leave, to shut the hatch and lock it away, let dust have its dominion once more. But desperation clawed at my resolve. With Lily involved, I needed to understand. I gently pushed further into the attic, eyes skimming over relics until they fell upon an old trunk. It was time-worn, its brass latches a tired, muted gleam under the dim light. I crouched beside it, steeling myself as I flipped the clasps open with fingers that felt foreign and slow. The lid creaked open, revealing layers of fabric, papers, and books, all seemingly innocuous until a photograph caught my eye. Its edges curled and yellowed, the scene it portrayed was intimate and unsettlingly familiar. A family huddled together, their eyes eerily drawn to the camera. Their forms were indistinct, yet I recognized our home in the backdrop, and standing next to them was a little girl. Her dress was outdated, her hair curled in the peculiar fashion of those old days, and yet her likeness to Lily was undeniable. My heartbeat thundered in my ears, that same icy feeling enveloping my spine and clasping tight. The past felt nearer, a cold breath on the back of my neck. This wasn't merely a trick of time or memory, this was something stronger, a tether binding the old to the now. Lily's friend wasn't imaginary, she was part of the fabric that wove through this place, a TH. Red still singing her stories into the rafters. Each moment stretched as realization dawned. The presence was not malevolent, nor was it benign. It existed, as things often do, between the shadows of our understanding. Unseen, unheard exceptions, growing roots into the lives they chose to accompany. Even now, I can't say for sure what this means for us, for Lily. Whether the past merely wishes to be acknowledged, or if it craves something more that I could never fully comprehend. So I descended the ladder, closing the hatch softly behind me, sealing away ghosts that whispered far too loudly now. But in doing so, I recognized that nothing would ever be quite the same again. The weight of unseen eyes followed every step I took, and the whisper of past lives clung to the walls. It leaves me wondering each time I hear Lily's laughter, is she playing with echoes, or is her friendship now as eternal as time?